Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is July the 16th, 2024. It has been 3,823 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 147 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years, 143 days since Russia expanded its war aggression. Today's podcast looks at events that happened on Monday and Tuesday morning. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There is a link in the podcast description, and there are map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. There are only minor changes from yesterday, so if you skip ahead, it won't hurt my feelings. I won't even know. 1. Russian losses of armor, mobility and personnel are unsustainable, even for Moscow, with continued indications that Russian combat potential is declining. 2. Russia will continue to make tactical gains during its current offensive, but the lack of strategy, low troop morale, poor battlefield medicine, corruption, and degraded logistics make it highly unlikely that Russian forces will be able to exploit any new breaches in 2024. 3. NATO's policy of escalation management is a failure, and Russia will continue to set conditions for kinetic acts of aggression in Europe. 4. Doubts about the competency of US President Joe Biden and the threats to leave NATO and end support to Ukraine by Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump are a direct threat to global stability and Ukraine's military capabilities in 2025 and beyond. 5. Russia will continue to commit increasingly worse violations of international humanitarian law until international watchdogs and Ukraine's allies take a unified and firm stance. 6. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine must hold Ukrainian field commanders who make critical mistakes accountable for their errors. 7. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. 8. Russia's sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has destroyed over 80% of its combined thermal and power plant capacity, is a continuation of Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022. As outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 9. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine. At the time that our daily situation report was written, a Shahed 136 one-way drone attack that started on Monday was in its 10th hour. This prevented our team from completing its analysis of Russian attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. Today's podcast starts with the action report summary. Yesterday, Russian forces carried out 119 assaults, continuing the downward trend that started on July the 2nd. Through July the 15th, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks dropped to 137, which is 15% lower than the July the 4th peak. The VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, carried out 131 airstrikes, dropping 135 UMPK glide bombs on civilian and military targets. Russian ground units executed 909 one-way drone attacks and over 4,300 fire missions with tubed and barrel artillery. Through July the 13th, the Russian officers killed in Ukraine project recorded 4,396 officers killed in action since February the 24th, 2022. Over the last 2 days, the death of 7 more officers was confirmed, bringing the count to 4,403. One of the officers killed was Lieutenant Nikolai Pavlov, who graduated from the Kazan Tank Command School in 2022. The Russian Ministry of Defense highlighted Pavlov and labeled him an elite warrior for allegedly destroying a Bradley infantry fighting vehicle and an M1A1 Abrams main battle tank. He was buried in the Republic of Tatarstan. Russia continues to lose slightly more than 5 officers a day. Now, let's talk about what happened on the battlefield. Ready? Here we go. Starting in the Kharkiv Oblast, we begin in the Lipti-Vovchansk area of operation, or AO. Russia attempted to counterattack in Vovchansk and on the northern and northeastern edges of Gluboka, launching 18 assaults, which ended in failure. Drone video showing the central part of Vovchansk showed that the apartment blocks north of the machine aggregate plant had been reduced to rubble. A Russian video showed that Ukrainian forces are now 1 block east of the Vovcha River on Torgova Street, on the edge of the hospital compound. The VKS dropped 3 bombs on a small low-head dam 3.5 kilometers west of Staritsa. 1 bomb hit the structure but did not cause a breach. It is unclear why the area was targeted. The Russian video did not show any evidence of military activity or Ukrainian positions in the area, and there are 2 land crossings 1,000 meters in either direction. Fighting was limited in the Kupiansk AO, with Russian forces attacking from Vilshana in the direction of Petropavlivka. In the Svatovo AO of the Luhansk Oblast, Russia continued its attempts to advance towards Telmachivka with no success. In the Kremena AO, Russian forces shifted their attacks south, trying to advance on Nevske and Terny after an extended pause. They suffered losses and retreated to their previous defensive positions. On July 13th, volunteer fighters with Ukraine from Colombia showed that Russia used chemical weapons to attack their positions in the Serebryansky forest, using drones to drop K-51 gas grenades armed with CS gas, more commonly known as tear gas. Russian forces attacked, forcing Ukrainian troops to abandon 2 sets of trenches. Members of the 12th Special Operations Azov Brigade counterattacked as soon as the gas dissipated and took one of the trenches back. The Chemical Weapons Convention bans the use of tear gas, and Russia is a signatory. On June 7th, the United States Department of State accused Russia of restarting its chemical weapons program. We link to a 16-minute-long video showing the fighting in Serebryansky forest in today's situation report. There is more information in the podcast description. Let's talk about the Donbass and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. In the Siversk AO, Russian forces continued their attempts to advance toward Bilogorivka from the east, Verkhnyokamyansk from Zolotarivka, past Spirne and into Rozdolivka. None of the assaults were successful. In the Kostantinivka AO, fighting continued between Bogdanivka and Grigorivka on the western edge of the canal district of Chasiv Yar and in the forested belts south of Kalinivka. Satellite images show that the engineered crossing across the Siversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal built by Ukrainian engineers is still intact, indicating that Ukrainian forces continue to operate in the no man's land to the north of the Chasiv Yar Canal district. The images are in today's sitrap. Heavy fighting continued in the Toretsk-New York AO and west of Avdiivka. Russian attempts to advance into Pivnichne and Toretsk were repulsed. Ukrainian drone video showed Russian troops occupying the apartment blocks in southeastern Pivdenne, recording a new advance. The video showed a Russian soldier attempting to enter an apartment building for over 4 minutes with minimal help from his comrades. In the end, he is killed before he can find a way in. Although Russian forces have not made significant gains in this region since the initial breakthrough in late June, the situation remains extremely difficult. Fighting also continued in the southern parts of New York, with no reports of new Russian advances. In the Avdiivka AO, Russian forces continued to creep towards Malinivka, Mirnograd and Pokrovsk, advancing on the T511 highway. Russian forces continued their attempts to consolidate their gains on the outskirts of Vozdvizhenka while advancing to the eastern edge of Lozovatska, where a Ukrainian drone attacked a Russian BMP-1 infantry fighting vehicle, confirming the new advance. Russian forces also advanced on the T511 highway and are now less than 750 meters from Progress. Intense fighting continued on the northern edge of Novoselivka-Persha. Further south, Russian attempts to capture the hamlet of Yasnobrodivka and advance into Karlivka were unsuccessful. Further south, in the Vuhledar AO, Russian forces advanced deeper into northwestern Krasnogorivka, while Ukrainian forces regained military control in the southwestern outskirts. We adjusted the map and coded the entire northern part of the settlement as contested. Ukrainian forces are being slowly pushed out of the residential areas, with most defensible positions destroyed or under Russian control. Russian forces increased activity in the western part of Paraskoviivka, trying to advance along the northern shore of the fishing pond. Fighting also continued on the outskirts of Kostiantynivka and between Vodyane and Solotke. In the Vremivka AO, Russian forces restarted their attacks on the southern edge of Makarivka. There were new reports of explosions near occupied Mariupol, knocking out power to almost half of the city. Insurgents reported that a Russian air defense battery was destroyed in the area of Bilosarayska Kosa and Melekine, with several secondary explosions. The spokesperson for the Ukrainian Navy, Dmytro Pletenchuk, announced that the last warship of the Black Sea Fleet, a Project 1135 Krivak-class frigate, left occupied Sevastopol and sailed to the new home of the Black Sea Fleet in Novorossiysk, that's in the Krasnodar Krai of Russia. Only 2 small minesweepers, an anti-submarine patrol boat and abandoned vessels remain in Sevastopol. The retreat, almost 13 months to the day Russia withdrew from the Black Sea Grain Initiative, yields control of the Black Sea back to Ukraine, representing a strategic victory in the battle to return Crimea. During the Battle of the Black Sea, the Russian Navy lost 25 surface ships and 1 submarine to a nation without a traditional navy and a cobbled-together air force. In the Odesa Oblast, 2 Russian Iskander MSRBMs struck the hangars at the civilian airfield near Naberezhne. The glow of a large fire and at least 1 secondary explosion were visible from Odessa. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed Ukrainian air defense systems were destroyed, but the Russian video suggests that the Yak-52 that has been targeting Russian surveillance drones was the primary target. The video also shows they missed. You can watch for yourself. Here is my Theaterwide update. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky appointed Alexander Trepak, commander of the Special Operation Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and Alexei Morozov, head of the State Protection Department, to the staff of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief. He also dismissed Alexander Kubrakov, Sergei Lupanchuk, and Sergei Ruch from the staff. The changes come after questions were raised about the performance of Alexander Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, during Russia's attack in northern Kharkiv and the start of an investigation into the conduct of the commanders of the 59th Motor Infantry Brigade. Zelensky said, quote, "I don't think that if anyone else were in Syrsky's place, there would have been no breakthrough. I believe it would have happened because the Russians wanted it. They had a task to come in and occupy Kharkiv." On Monday, Syrsky ordered an on-site investigation into the situation with the 59th Brigade to understand excessive losses with the unit. Last week, Ukrainian paramedic and former prisoner of war Katerina Polishchuk appealed to President Zelensky to investigate Bogdan Shevchuk, the brigade commander. Quote, I ask you, Mr. Supreme Commander-in-Chief, to pay attention and conduct an official investigation into criminal orders, deliberate negligence, disregard for the lives and health of personnel, actions resulting in the death of numerous servicemen, including those in high leadership positions, self-interest, blind careerism, removal of all dissenting commanders, suppression of fighting spirit, and humiliation of personnel with complete indifference to the primary goal of servicemen and your goal as a commander in the war against the enemy. Polishchuk, who was featured in the Academy Award-winning documentary 20 Days in Mariupol, said she had been forced to end cooperation with the brigade due to, quote, inhumane and unprofessional treatment. In other news, President Zelensky said that the mobilization campaign is going according to the plans of the Ministry of Defense, but there are not enough training facilities. He added that work was being done to expand the training grounds and cooperate with Ukraine's allies to increase the number of troops trained by military partners. While the European Union mulls over a Polish proposal to restart a coal-fired power plant to provide Ukraine with more electricity, Lithuanian energy company Ignitis Gamyba announced that it was giving away the equipment from the decommissioned Vilnius third combined heat and power plant to Ukraine. Quote, even though the plant has been closed for 9 years, we were able to preserve its equipment, which retained its full functionality. The plant, with a total heat and electrical capacity of nearly 1,000 megawatts, operated for over 30 years and supplied heat to roughly half of Vilnius. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen cancelled a planned visit to Hungary by the College of Commissioners and announced that while Viktor Orban holds the rotating presidency, the European Commission will be represented by senior-level civil servants during all informal meetings. The decision comes after Orban announced the creation of a transnational far-right nationalist political party and met with autocrat Vladimir Putin, President of China Xi Jinping, and Republican nominee for United States President Donald Trump on an alleged peace mission. Last week, the European Union's legal service had earlier found that the Hungarian Prime Minister's talks with Putin violated EU treaties. Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas submitted her resignation as she prepares to become the next High Representative of the EU for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy for the European Union. Kallas will remain in office pending her confirmation and the formation of a new government in Estonia. The Spanish Ministry of Defense announced it was sending 10 restored Leopard 2A4 main battle tanks to Ukraine, heavy construction equipment for building fortifications, and anti-tank guided missiles. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.